The moment the crowd went silent, they had followed him for miles. Some came for healing, some out of curiosity, and some because something deep inside whispered that this man was different. The air on that hillside felt charged, almost like creation itself was waiting for the next word to be spoken. When Jesus finally sat down, a hush rolled through the crowd. Mothers pulled their children close. Fishermen wiped the sweat from their brows, and even the skeptics leaned forward. Nobody knew what he was about to say. They only knew that whatever it was, it would change them. And then his voice broke the silence. "Blessed are the poor in spirit." Simple words, but they didn't land simply. People looked at each other, confused. Poor in spirit. Why would a lack become a blessing? They had been raised to believe strength was everything: power, wealth, status. But Jesus flipped the entire value system upside down in one sentence. "Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the meek." Every line felt like a gentle strike on the human heart. He wasn't promising comfort to the proud or the powerful. He wasn't lifting up those who dominated others. He was calling the broken, the humble, the ones who had been ignored by society. He was saying your pain matters, your humility matters, your hunger for righteousness matters. And for the first time, people felt seen not for what they owned, but for what they carried inside. A fisherman named Eli stood in the back. Life had never been gentle with him. He'd lost a child, struggled to make ends meet, and always felt like God was far away. But now, with every word Jesus spoke, Eli felt something melt inside him. It wasn't hope exactly. It was something deeper. Permission. Permission to believe that God cared for people like him. And then came the line that pierced every heart on that mountain. "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God." Not warriors, not rulers, not those who crush their enemies, but the ones who heal wounds, restore relationships, create harmony in a world addicted to conflict. In that moment, people realized this wasn't just a sermon. It was a new way of living, a revolution without swords, a kingdom built not on force, but on transformed hearts. The hillside was silent, yet every soul was trembling, because they knew nothing would ever be the same again. The law written on the heart. The crowd was still absorbing his opening words when Jesus looked across the hillside, his eyes calm yet piercing. People wondered, was he bringing something new? Was he challenging everything they had been taught since childhood? Then he spoke with clarity that cut through every doubt. "Do not think that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I came not to destroy, but to fulfill." A murmur ran through the crowd. Fulfill? How does a carpenter's son fulfill the sacred law given to Moses? But Jesus wasn't talking about rituals or rules written on stone. He was talking about something far more intimate: truth, written on the human heart. He continued, "Unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven." Gasps, shock. The Pharisees were the experts, the guardians of the law. How could an ordinary person ever exceed them? But Jesus wasn't raising the bar. He was revealing what true righteousness looked like. A young man named Jonah stood near the front. He had always admired the religious teachers, their robes, their long prayers, their public displays of holiness. But he also saw how quickly they judged others, how their hearts often felt cold. Now, listening to Jesus, Jonah sensed a different kind of righteousness. Righteousness that wasn't measured by appearance, but by authenticity. And then Jesus spoke the words that would echo through centuries. You have heard that it was said, "You shall not murder." But I say to you, if you are angry with your brother, you are already guilty. The people froze. He wasn't just talking about violence. He was talking about bitterness, grudges, silent hatred. The things that are hidden, the things no one else sees. It was as if Jesus reached into the unseen corners of the human soul and gently flipped on the light. He continued, if you are offering your gift at the altar and you remember your brother has something against you, leave your gift, go, make peace first. This was more than a rule. It was an invitation into freedom. The crowd realized something powerful. God wasn't just watching their actions, he cared about their intentions, their motives, their inner life. Jonah felt his throat tighten. He remembered a friend he hadn't spoken to in years because of a small misunderstanding. For the first time, he felt God urging him to heal that wound. As Jesus paused, the breeze swept across the hillside, almost as if heaven itself was whispering. Righteousness begins inside, the battle within the eyes. The crowd leaned closer as Jesus shifted his message from the heart to something even more personal, the unseen. Desires carried within a person's eyes. The sun rested directly above the hillside now, shining across the gathering like a spotlight. It was as if every soul there knew he was about to expose something they tried hard to hide. You have heard it said, Jesus began, "You shall not commit adultery." Everyone nodded. This was familiar, a law old as their nation itself, a command repeated by parents, taught in synagogues, woven into their moral fabric. But then his next words sent a ripple through the entire crowd. But I say to you, whoever looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. People froze. He wasn't talking about physical acts. He was talking about the silent storms inside the mind, the hidden fantasies, the private choices. Suddenly, righteousness wasn't just about staying away from wrong, it was about guarding the deepest desires of the heart. A man named Matthias, standing quietly among the crowd, felt a sting of conviction. He had never broken the law outwardly. He was proud of that. But inside, his thoughts had wandered into places he would never admit aloud. Now Jesus was speaking as if he saw straight through him. But there was no condemnation in Jesus' eyes, only truth wrapped in compassion. He continued, if your right eye causes you to stumble, tear it out. If your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off. The crowd trembled, but they knew he wasn't speaking of literal harm. He was revealing the seriousness of inner battles. The message was clear. Some things must be removed from your life, not because they look dangerous, but because they quietly destroy you. Matthias thought of the habits he defended, the temptations he entertained, the excuses he made. Jesus was showing him that real transformation required courage, courage to confront the hidden parts of the soul and to let go of anything that poisons it. Then Jesus' voice softened, almost like he was speaking to each heart individually. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Purity wasn't about perfection. It was about devotion, about choosing God over temptation, one quiet decision at a time. The hillside went silent again, because they all knew the truth. The greatest battles aren't fought with swords, but within the secret chambers of the heart, the sacred weight of words. The wind shifted across the hillside as Jesus continued, and his next teaching struck at a place people rarely questioned their words. The very things they spoke casually, emotionally, or carelessly. People had always believed that as long as they kept their promises and avoided breaking oaths, they were righteous. But Jesus was about to pull back the veil. "You have heard it said," he announced, "do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made." Heads nodded. This was the old way, the system that measured a person's character by how well they kept their promises. Then Jesus lifted their understanding to a level no one expected. "But I say to you, do not swear at all. Let your yes be yes, and your no be no." A wave of confusion rolled through the crowd. If not by oaths, then how would people prove their sincerity, their honesty, their reliability? A woman named Miriam stood among the listeners with her young daughter beside her. She had lived a life surrounded by broken promises, friends who said one thing and did another, merchants who vowed fairness but delivered deceit, even relatives who swore loyalty but vanished when life grew hard. Her heart tightened as Jesus continued. "Anything beyond this comes from evil." It wasn't the words themselves that mattered, it was the integrity behind them. Jesus was showing them something revolutionary. Your character is not proven by loud promises, but by quiet consistency. Miriam felt her eyes sting. She remembered how often she had said things she didn't mean, how easily she had added dramatic assurances just to sound convincing. She suddenly realized that truth didn't need decoration. Truth stood firm on its own. Jesus looked across the faces, and his expression held a firm tenderness. He wasn't commanding them to speak less, but to speak truthfully, to stop using God's name or sacred objects to make their words feel stronger, to stop saying what they never intended to do, to let honesty become a lifestyle, not a performance. On that hillside, people realized something they had never considered. Their words weren't small. They carried weight. They shaped trust, relationships, and destiny. Miriam squeezed her daughter's hand and whispered something she had never meant more in her life. "From now on, my yes will be yes." And in that moment, she felt something shift inside her, a new integrity being born, one word at a time. The power of the second mile. The hillside grew warmer as the sun moved across the sky, but no one dared leave. Every sentence Jesus spoke rewrote their understanding of morality and faith. And now, he was about to touch the most sensitive subject in their world: revenge, justice, and how people respond when wronged. "You have heard it said," Jesus began, "an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth." This was the law they knew. It balanced fairness. It kept society in order. It made sense. If someone hurt you, you had the right to hurt them back in equal measure. But Jesus wasn't calling them to what makes sense. He was calling them to something deeper. "But I say to you, do not resist an evil person." The crowd stiffened. Not resist? How could anyone survive like that? What about dignity, protection, justice? Then he gave examples so bold they shook the listeners. If someone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other also. If someone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them too. If someone asks from you, give freely. A fisherman named Caleb clenched his jaw. He lived under Roman occupation. Soldiers had the legal right to make Jews carry their gear for exactly 1 mile. It was humiliating, an everyday reminder of their powerlessness. But now Jesus was saying, don't just carry it 1 mile. Offer too. Caleb's fists tightened. Why would anyone choose to do more for someone who was oppressing them? Then the realization hit him. Jesus wasn't teaching weakness, he was teaching unstoppable strength. The kind of strength that refuses to let hatred control the heart. The kind of strength that transforms the world by breaking the cycle of retaliation. Jesus wasn't asking them to be victims. He was asking them to be victors through compassion, not aggression. Caleb imagined walking that 2nd mile, not as a slave, but as a free man. Not out of force, but out of choice. And suddenly the picture changed. The soldier would no longer be in control, Caleb's kindness would be. The entire crowd felt the weight of this new way of living. Revenge only multiplies pain, but grace disarms it. Jesus looked over the hillside, his voice firm yet full of mercy. Be the ones who choose peace when others choose bitterness. Be the ones who carry love farther than the world expects. And on that mountain, people realized 1 extra mile could change everything. Love beyond the lines. The crowd had already heard teachings that challenged everything they believed about righteousness. But what Jesus said next would become the most radical, most uncomfortable, and most transformative command he had ever spoken. You have heard it said, he began, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Everyone understood this. Loving those who loved you back was normal, natural, expected, and hating enemies felt justified, especially when those enemies had caused real pain. But then Jesus spoke a line that struck the hillside like lightning. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. A stunned silence fell across the crowd. Love your enemies? It felt impossible, unrealistic, even offensive. A man named Samuel stood with his arms crossed. His family had suffered under Roman rule and fair taxes, threats, insults, humiliation. The idea of loving the very people who crushed their dignity felt like betrayal. But Jesus wasn't asking them to agree with injustice. He was asking them to rise above the cycle of hatred. He continued, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. For he makes the sun rise on the evil and the good. The message became clear. God doesn't love selectively. He loves completely. And those who follow him are called to love the same way. Samuel felt his chest tighten. He remembered a Roman officer who once slapped his brother without reason. The rage still lived deep inside him. But now Jesus was asking him to release that hatred not for the enemy's sake, but for his own soul. Jesus went on, if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Even the tax collectors do that. It was a challenge, one that forced everyone on the hillside to confront their deepest biases. Love wasn't meant to be a transaction. It wasn't meant to be a reward system. It wasn't meant only for the deserving. Love was meant to be a reflection of God. Slowly, Samuel realized something powerful. Hatred had kept him chained for years, but love real, Christ-like love was the key to his freedom. Jesus finished with a call that echoed like a heartbeat over the hillside. Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. Not perfect in performance, but perfect in love. And in that moment, they all understood. The greatest proof of faith is how you treat those who can't or won't love you back. It in devotion, heavenly reward. As the crowd listened, Jesus shifted from outward actions to something even more personal, the motives behind spiritual practices. People in that time often prayed loudly in public, gave to the poor with exaggerated gestures, and fasted in ways that made everyone notice their sacrifice. Religion had become a performance, a stage where admiration mattered more than sincerity. But Jesus had come to expose the truth beneath the surface. Be careful, he warned, not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. The hillside grew quiet. Everyone knew the type of person. He was talking about the ones who acted humble but lived for applause. Jesus continued, when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets. Your Father who sees in secret will reward you. A young woman named Leah felt her heartbeat quicken. She remembered the wealthy, men in her village who tossed coins toward the poor only when a crowd was watching. She remembered how righteousness had become a spectacle. But now Jesus was unveiling a deeper truth. Real goodness doesn't need an audience. He moved on to prayer. When you pray, do not be like the hypocrites who love to stand on the street corners, to be seen by others. Some people shifted uncomfortably. They had been taught that loud, public prayer meant greater devotion. But Jesus was redefining everything. Go into your room, he said softly. Close the door. Pray to your Father who is unseen. Leah felt something warm rise in her chest. A private conversation with God? A relationship without performance? It felt freeing. Human applause faded quickly, but God's presence was eternal. Then Jesus guided them into the heart of prayer, not long speeches, not complicated rituals, but simple trust. Your Father knows what you need before you ask him. Every word peeled away the pressure of trying to impress God. He wasn't looking for poetic phrases. He was looking for honesty. Then Jesus turned to fasting. When you fast, do not look somber as the hypocrites do, but wash your face, so it will not be obvious to others that you are fasting. The crowd finally understood the pattern. Give quietly, pray secretly, fast privately, because the audience that truly matters is God alone. Leah breathed deeply as the truth settled over her. Heaven's reward belongs not to those who seek attention, but to those who seek God, the treasure that owns the heart. The sun had begun its slow descent, casting long shadows across the hillside. People pulled their cloaks closer, but no one moved. They sensed the next words would touch the most guarded corner of the human soul, the place where desire, fear, and security intertwine. Jesus lifted his voice gently, yet every syllable carried unmistakable authority. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, he said, where moth and rust destroy, and thieves break in and steal. A quiet heaviness fell across the crowd. Everyone knew the insecurity of life grains stolen in the night, savings ruined by taxes, valuables lost to decay. Earthly treasure was fragile, Yet people chased it endlessly. Then Jesus offered a different direction. But store up treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys. A middle-aged merchant named Elias stood near the back. His life had been driven by trade buying, selling, accumulating. The more he earned, the more he feared losing it. His mind was always calculating, always anxious. But now Jesus was offering an entirely new way of measuring wealth. Then came the sentence that pierced straight through him. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Elias felt exposed. His treasure wasn't just in his storage rooms, it was in his identity. His worth was tied to his profits. His heart belonged to what he feared losing. Jesus continued, giving an image so simple yet so powerful. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if the eye was clouded, focused on greed, envy, comparison, then the whole life remained dark. Jesus wasn't talking about eyesight. He was talking about perspective. What you look at shapes what you become. Elias realized his eyes had been fixed on the wrong things his entire life. Then Jesus delivered the truth that changed everything. No one can serve two masters. You cannot serve both God and money. It wasn't a warning, it was liberation. A divided heart was an exhausted heart. A heart stretched between wealth and God would always feel restless, anxious, unsatisfied. Elias felt tears burn at the corners of his eyes. For the first time, he saw money not as security, but as a chain, and Jesus was offering to break it. As the crowd breathed in the cool evening air, a quiet revelation settled into their souls. True treasure isn't what you store in your hands, but what you surrender to God in your heart. Freedom from the weight of tomorrow. As daylight softened into evening gold, Jesus turned to a struggle every person on that hillside understood: worry. Not the mild kind, but the heavy, sleepless kind that squeezes the chest and steals peace. Worry about food, clothing, survival. About tomorrow. He spoke with a calm authority that felt like a hand resting on every anxious heart. Do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, nor about your body, what you will wear. Some people exchanged bewildered looks. How could they not worry? Life for them was uncertain. A bad harvest, a sickness, or a Roman tax could change everything overnight. Among them was a young father named Daniel. He worked long days just to feed his family. His fears followed him like a shadow: fear of failure, fear of scarcity, fear of the unknown. As Jesus continued, Daniel felt as though these words were meant for him alone. Look at the birds of the air, Jesus said. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, yet your Father feeds them. Birds small, fragile creatures, yet they never panicked, never stored up security, never feared tomorrow. Still, God cared for them. Then Jesus added, "Are you not much more valuable than they?" Daniel swallowed hard. He had never thought of himself as valuable. Life often made him feel replaceable, insignificant. But now Jesus was telling him something extraordinary. God didn't just see him, God valued him. Jesus continued with gentle logic. Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? The crowd knew the answer. Worry never adds, it only takes. Then he pointed to the hillside lily. See how the flowers grow. They do not work or spin. Yet even Solomon in all his splendor was not dressed like one of these. Daniel looked at the wildflowers glowing in the sun. No effort, no striving, yet beautiful. If God cared for them, how much more would he care for his children? Then Jesus gave a command that felt less like a rule and more like an invitation. Seek first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added to you. Daniel felt something loosen inside him. A knot he had carried for years began to dissolve. Jesus finished with words that glowed like hope. Do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel believed it. Because peace wasn't in the future, it was standing right in front of him. The foundation that never falls. The light was fading, but Jesus' final words carried a power brighter than the setting sun. Every teaching, every truth, every heart-piercing challenge he had spoken had led to this moment, a moment where he revealed the difference between hearing his words and living them. He looked across the hillside at the faces that had traveled miles to listen. And then he spoke a closing parable that would echo through centuries. Everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. A murmur moved through the crowd. Everyone knew the strength of a rock foundation, unshakable, solid, immovable. But Jesus wasn't talking about houses. He was talking about lives. He continued, the rain came down, the floods rose, and the winds blew. But the house stood firm. A fisherman named Andrew felt these words deeply. Storms were part of his life, violent waves, unpredictable winds, nights where the sea threatened to swallow everything. He knew what it meant to depend on a strong foundation. But Jesus was describing a storm much bigger than the sea. The storms of life, loss, betrayal, temptation, fear, disappointment. Storms that attacked the heart, not the boat. Then Jesus gave the contrast. But everyone who hears these words and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. Andrew's chest tightened. Sand shifted. Sand gave way. Sand looked stable until the storm exposed the truth. And many people, he realized, including himself, had built parts of their lives on things that could never hold them up. Jesus' voice grew firm. The rain came down, the floods rose, and the winds blew, and the house fell with a great crash. Silence spread over the hillside like a wave. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning born out of deep love. Jesus was giving them a choice to foundations, to futures, to ways of living. Rock or sand, obedience or convenience, transformation or mere admiration. Andrew felt something settle in his spirit. He didn't want to be a man who only listened. He wanted to live differently. He wanted a foundation that couldn't be shaken by anything in this world. As Jesus finished his sermon, the crowd sat in absolute awe, not because of his volume or theatrics, but because his words carried the authority of truth itself. And they walked down that mountain knowing one thing: those who live by his words stand unshakable no matter how fierce the storm.